Hey everyone, my name is Nathan Payne. Welcome to another episode of Coffee and Crypto. We've got Miles, head of research at Blu Ocean Games Guild, joining us today. Thanks for coming by.
Well, thanks for having me. I love being here.
It's always a pleasure. A lot I wanted to talk about today. So I want to cover some of the recent news that's going on that's obviously impacting the industry. Talk a little bit how about that's going to impact play to earn. And specifically, we also just seen a report about the top play to earn games in 2023 based on daily active users, which is really
recently CoinGecko published this report that shows a graph of the highest number of daily active wallets, which is the equivalent of daily active users in a traditional video game for Web3 games. And the numbers are not super surprising. Like the top game being, I think it was Alien Worlds, with something like 120 or 140,000 active wallets daily.
Yeah,
which is not super shocking. That number could be a lot higher. Like if we were talking about 18 months ago, I'm sure the number would be a little bit higher. But what's shocking to me was the genre and the complexity of the games listed on this list. A lot of the games listed on this list were really basic DeFi games.
That clickers.
We would call clickers, you know what I mean, for the most part. And Splinterlands, while it is not necessarily a clicker, it kind of is in a way, because it is a deterministic game, a game that is determined before, once you click the button, it kind of just calculates and that's how it plays. So there's less nuance to a game like that than there is to a non-deterministic game, card game such as Gods Unchained, where you actually have to sort of strategize and
didn't make the
turn
list
by turn
at all.
Play your way to victory, which is interesting to me. It didn't make the list at all, but it was one of the top contenders and one of the talked about games at the Web3 Gamer Awards. So what's interesting to me actually is to see this huge sort of juxtaposition between the games that were showcased at the Web3 Gamer Awards and the games that are actually getting DAW today.
Yeah, and I think that's because a lot of people are like, oh, we need fun games, we need AAA quality games. Yes, absolutely, I agree with that. But it's showing that people are still playing these games for earning potentials, not just for fun. So I think you're right about the juxtaposition. It's kind of showing that even though we all want more fun games and games that we can enjoy and have a AAA experience with, the ones that are very financially oriented are what's getting the most activity. And we kind of seen that, like Farmer's World was third on the list, and actually quite a bit larger, more daily active users than anything underneath the list.
So the number one was somewhere in the 150,000 range, I think. Yep. Number two, I believe, was Splinterlands at the 70 or 80.
Yeah, and
then number three was Farmer's World at like 60 or 50, I believe it was. And then all the games underneath that were 30, then 20, then 10, then less.
And I mean, seeing things like Prospectors and even just some of these other clicker games, Upland, higher than Illuvium, big time, not even on the list. It was definitely interesting to see, okay, there are still more people playing these as financial tools than games. And I don't know if that's ever going to change. I think there might be two kind of fields of people where if a game has good returning potential or you're playing to make money, that's your clickers, because then you only have to log in so many hours to do very minimal work.
Well, and it's simulating an economic process that is well known. And the other thing is that the people who are playing these games are often people who will day trade shitcoins. I don't like to use. Maybe I should use a different word for that.
No, that's what they're called.
But because people are day trading these altcoins, day trading these game coins, and because they're so extremely volatile, it entices people into trying to find that next thing that will be 1,000% overnight. It'll go from half a cent to 5 cents,
and play to earn. You see that more than anything,
and it happens very often in play to earn.
I like to use the analogy. I brought this up a few times. When I first got into crypto, it was Bitcoin. And then after understanding Bitcoin and reading the white paper, I learned about Ethereum. And then after Ethereum, it led me to all the altcoins, like all the layer 2s and everything else. And then after that, it led me to shitcoins. And then shitcoins led me to play to earn.
This brings me to my grand point. My grand point, actually, is that currently with a lot of the sort of backlash, the back and forth that we're seeing with regulations concerning cryptocurrency in the United States and globally, and this, I guess, discussion that the whole world is having about it, some people are condemning cryptocurrency and some people are supporting it. But the important thing is that the people who are not fully informed seem to be going after what they know, which is the base level, which is Bitcoin and Ethereum. You know what I mean?
Well, to finish my point, what I was trying to say there was the reason I went through that chain is when you go down to shitcoins particularly, you start to see these giant, raises and gains and losses. Right. Play to earn's the same way. right? Like I remember Farmers World going up 1,100% in a single day.
Yeah, when they did
know.
their UI.
And it doesn't matter how
announcement
much
and
money
update.
you have invested. If you have $100, you're still getting your 1,010%, or $1,000,000, you're still getting. So the risk is much higher. It's definitely more akin to
Right.
gambling.
That's right.
But there is a lot more upside, and I think a lot of people in DeFi and in play to earn kind of understand.
Well, and
that.
maybe I should have prefaced with this is not financial advice, but what I was going to
Yes.
say is that a lot of people are wondering, where is the safe and secure place to be putting their money during a time of turmoil like this? And a lot of people are saying, oh, we should put our money into Bitcoin. A lot of people are saying, don't put your money into Bitcoin because if you're American, it could cause problems or whatever it might be, with opinions concerning that whole shtick. And then I thought about it a little bit, and I realized that with all this stuff going on, the media and the government and the SEC and all these other organizations that are talking about crypto, what they're not talking about is game tokens. They're not talking about NFT
That's
game
right.
currency, and they're not talking about gamify stuff. And I've also noticed that while you see, Bitcoin and Ethereum have been sort of steadily going up with their ups and downs, and then they reach that middle point where the maximum and the minimum were really, really tight. And we're like, is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? We saw an up. But with the gamify at the far down, you see the more volatile stuff. We saw lots of ups.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I think that is because people are realizing, well, if we put all of our liquidity into a project that's promising that we know is going to succeed in the future, in the form of NFTs or in the form of a staking somehow in their game tokens or whatever it might be, well, the government is not likely to go after that particular thing because it's not.
The only small
Bitcoin,
detail
what I
there
mean?
that I would think of is them kind of trying to go against DeFi after DeFi. So that is kind of being discussed right now.
Yeah.
And that might incorporate a lot of kind of this game stuff, but it's going to be another gray area. And it's really interesting because, me, especially operating the Game Guild, I'm constantly tracking charts every single day. And there was one thing that I noticed that I wouldn't have guessed, but I just kind of learned through doing this. When I would see kind of a run or a boost in Bitcoin or Ethereum, everyone knows kind of altcoins follow that trajectory.
Yeah, the
right?
Bitcoin 4-year cycle.
Play to earn is usually about 24 to 48 hours behind that.
Right.
So basically, when I'm watching kind of the charts of Bitcoin in the top 100 coins, that can give me a good indication or a good signal of what's potentially going to happen. And it kind of makes sense. There's more liquidity in the system. People start making riskier bets.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah,
But if
that's
you
true.
can get ahead of that, there can be a lot of opportunities there. And of course, none of this is financial advice. This is just
Right.
what we learned by
this is
going
our
through
our
and kind of-
empirical sort of findings.
And then, for us as a game guild, it's kind of interesting because I'd almost call myself an NFT maximist in a way. Like I would rather hold all my assets in NFTs. Now, yes, that's risky in certain ways. The NFTs can be volatile too. It depends on reputation, all that stuff. But I feel more confident holding assets that can earn, especially with staking rewards and things like that. It's kind of akin to staking your tokens to get behind projects that we are well versed in because that's our domain.
Well, it's interesting to me because a lot of people who are proponents of the Diamond Hands NFT sort of strategy are feeling pretty confident right now while they're watching people fumble around with their tokens.
Yep.
They're like, oh my gosh, where am I going to put my tokens? It's like, well, there's an obvious place.
Because
you can
people
put them.
seen what happened with like the crypto kitties and bored apes and all that, and like people getting in the beginning and holding it cheap, and there was dips and stuff, and people were like, no, I'm going to keep holding, and that made so many people, young people in particular, a ton of money.
That's right.
So the upside with NFTs, people know, is rather huge, and there's still a huge market. Like it surprised me kind of following the bear market in relation to NFTs, because yes, a lot of the floor prices dipped, but then they really stabilized quite for a while.
True.
And things were still trading like Bored Ape Foreplay 60, 70 ETH still.
Well, and you have to remember that in the grand scheme of like the history of things, if we were talking about the history of the internet, we're at like 1996 or 1997.
Yeah.
Like we're still super early.
Mm-hmm.
So we won't see this like sort of mass adoption and mass discussion about this whole thing for another couple of years.
Yeah, I actually think maybe even faster, because this is kind of a good point to bring up some of the banking stuff that's going on, because First Republic Bank, their stock just crashed either today or yesterday, 94 or 97%.
That's crazy.
And a bunch of banks, I think, basically funneled like $30 billion towards the bank, like other banks, to try to help support.
Try to help them bail them
And
out.
it's not working. And the American government said, no, they're not bailing them out. So that's what they did with the bank, Silicon Valley Bank in California, was they bailed it out and everything was fine. And, kind of, okay, we just dealt with this. Well, they're not doing it with this bank.
So what's the difference between the one and the other, I wonder? Why would they bail the one out and not bail the other one out?
That's speculation right now, because I don't really know either. But I mean, maybe they're also realizing, well, we can't do this to all the banks, and if it's just going to keep cascading, and that's what the argument is right now. This is just accelerated the banking crisis.
They're going
now.
to see it
Because now they're not just going to step
in
in and bail out every bank that goes through this situation.
Right.
So,
So now the guys who are panicking are like, well, even if something does happen, like there's no bailout for us, and they have real reason to panic.
yeah, and I wonder like what happens to the customers' funds, what happens to people who own assets through that bank. Like there's a lot of questions right now, and that's why we just seen a big spike. Bitcoin went up 5% in 4 hours.
Yeah, so there's
Not
been a
even
lot of discussions in
24
the
hours.
last 2 to 3 weeks about whether Bitcoin was going to reach that we see the ebbs and flows of it sort of.
Yeah, the 30,000 mark was kind
and
of
then
its
the 30,000
resistance.
mark was supposed to be the resistance mark, and we were going to see it sort of tighten there with no high ceiling and no low floor, and it was going to sit there and either go up or go down. That was about a week and a half ago. Well, it went up, and it seems to continue to be going up as things
it
unfold.
did like a big dip for sure. There was a bit of a capitulation, which was really people being over leveraged, which tends to happen when things start to go up. And then we seen it go down to 27, 28,000, and then it started climbing again. And then seeing the news with the bank here, now there's this direct correlation that everyone's kind of understanding. Okay, when there's news around banking crisis or financial crisis, the correlation to crypto is more revenue gets moved in there.
Yeah.
And I think the most important thing is people's perception of crypto being a risk on asset is what's changing. Now it's changing to becoming a store of value to hedge against the financial system, traditional
People are
financial
understanding
system,
that slowly,
to hedge against the collapse of the US dollar. And essentially what gold always was for people. That's what gold would do, right?
Yeah,
People always moved their
right.
store value into gold, and that was their safe haven during
right.
depressions and recessions. And now people are realizing, well, Bitcoin's easier. I can store Bitcoin as much as I want. You know, I'm not going to store $1 million of gold in my home. You know, you're going to have to store it at a bank. And do we really want to be storing stuff at banks right now?
Well, and then we also have the conversation about USDT. USDT is poised to break its record high cap of a market cap of I think it was like $83 billion or something like that. And that seems to be turning some heads. And we have this discussion about like having like US backed stable coins offshore and what's going to happen with that, and if there's anything that the United States can do about that, and if they want to do anything about that, and that whole thing. So
yeah, it's really interesting you bring that up, because we know about the hearing that happened with Gary Gensler recently.
Yeah, that's right.
And
that was a big thing.
And there's a couple key things I gleaned from that. Like, I understand now why he couldn't answer if Ethereum was a security or not, and he's actually literally can't answer it because there's a statutory bar of 5 years. And Ethereum was registered before that. So because it wasn't deemed a security back then, they can't veto it. But if they were to admit that it's not a security, which really is what it is because they can't veto that, then all these other coins and exchanges have a grounds to say, well, our coins, our network is just like Ethereum. So now they have something to fight against this lawsuit. And they can't say that it's not a secure, like they're screwed no matter what they say. They can't say it is because of the statutory bar, and then they can't say it isn't because of what the issue implicates.
Yeah, it seemed like a
for all
big
their
case of when in
lawsuits.
doubt, mumble.
Yeah, but it was really interesting because I definitely got the impression from Congress that they understand that this is probably one of the largest financial screw-ups of American history, because tech companies are leaving, crypto exchanges are leaving, companies are leaving. Where do you think all that money and innovation is going?
Yeah,
Overseas.
there seems to be a large portion of people who have this opinion that they just kind of want to like sweep this under the rug and it's not a thing and forget about it. But the rest of the world isn't doing that, and if we don't keep up,
yeah,
you know
technology
what I mean?
doesn't slow down. I think a great example.
It was the same
of this,
with the internet.
Great example of this is social media versus cable news networks, and the control on that.
Yeah, that's another good example.
What was really good for the governments and we'll just say the elites, I guess you could say, with mass media and television, it was very easy to control the networks, what narratives were allowed to be said and not.
That's a fact.
And then social media happened, and all of a sudden direct one-to-one conversations were happening. People could create their own narratives.
Yeah.
So it was this clusterfuck.
They couldn't police
police
network.
it, but then they figured out how. They ended up working with the tech companies, Facebook, Twitter, because they could control what information was allowed to be disseminated. And that's why we see them going after TikTok and trying to restrict YouTube.
That's interesting to me too, because it
was
was only by chance that that the control aggregated in those companies. It was only because we took interest in them in the first place that control aggregated in those companies' hands.
Yeah, it's kind of using that to reference crypto. It's like I think a lot of people are kind of understanding more now what's really going on in the world, how the financial system.
So that brings me
works.
to my next sort of quandary, I suppose you would call it. we have this sort of I guess you would call it a battle between centralization and decentralization with these sort of government backed centralized cryptocurrencies
CBDCs.
that they're trying to deploy, and then with the obviously the networks that we know and love that are trying to promote decentralization. And
The one thing I'll add to that, they can never stop Bitcoin. Like the network is 10 times stronger than the best supercomputer.
What I wanted to talk about is it's actually kind of extends towards the DAO. There's been a lot of talk about how DAOs are not in and of themselves inherently decentralized if the systems presented within them, the governance systems in them, are not decentralized. And so I just kind of wanted to like bring a little bit of discussion towards DAOs and good DAOs and bad DAOs and what's the difference.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people that claim to be a DAO actually have some formation of centralization within their organization still. So there are ones out there that you would say true DAO, all governance tokens that people hold, there's equal votes, and they'll do that. But companies, I mean, actually, I don't think it was Yuga Labs. I think it was another NFT project where one of the directors made a decision irregardless of the votes, and that caused a ton of scrutiny.
Yeah.
And they ended up doing it anyways. And it was like, well, then what's the point of being in this DAO?
That's the
if
first
you can
thing.
just veto our vote.
The other thing is, though,
Oh,
there's,
that sounds like the government.
I don't remember where I saw it, but I remember seeing a statistic somewhere that said that less than 1% of wallet holders have more than like 60% of voting power in a lot of popular DAOs. And that's based on, because a lot of those DAOs are function based on how much of a token, how much weight you control.
Yeah, so there's chance for corruption.
And so there's a chance for there's an inherent chance of plutocracy in these systems, you know what I mean? And so we have to develop DAO systems that support anti-plutocracy, that support sort of
have some guardrails on them.
an ageless and balanced method of governance.
And you need a little bit, like, centralization isn't necessarily inherently bad. We just use it in relation to government a lot of the times. But like Ethereum is centralized. In fact, almost most other coins are centralized. Bitcoin is the one true decentralized thing there. And that's why, you know, push comes to shove, yes, I think Bitcoin is the safest thing to be involved in.
I think the ideal superior system is a Bitcoin type system that is fully decentralized with a DAO that is also fully decentralized in the same manner as Bitcoin backing it.
And I'm sure we'll see more stuff like that. The issues with DAO right now is the legalese involved. Like, what if that company goes bankrupt? How do you go after the director? Who's the director? How do you, like, our current business structure is not set up to accommodate this new type of formation.
Yeah, decentralized.
So all of that stuff has to be rewritten and accommodated for, because like bankruptcy is a good example. Who are you going after for assets? Everyone in the entire DAO?
Yeah, that's right.
Who's the director?
And how did you even
who registers the company? Because if someone's registering the company, wouldn't they be the owner? But they can't inherently, because that's against the definition of a DAO.
That's
right. So that has to be worked out within some of the legal systems, and I like it because it's showing pushback of like, hey, this technology is going to keep moving forward regardless of what anyone thinks. Even if like America said, oh, crypto's done, banned, like let's say the Five Eyes are just like, oh, crypto's banned. Crypto's not going to stop.
No, it'll continue to happen.
It'll continue to thrive.
In the same way that prohibition continued to happen, even though they banned alcohol.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Same
now,
idea.
what I was going to say is that this idea of like plutocracy DAO versus, you know, a properly organized governance system in the form of a DAO, I'm realizing it extends really, really easily and quickly into I would say game research. When you look at a game that touts that they have a DAO, the first thing that I do, and this is a lesson that I learned a very long time ago, go and look for if they have any logic or any system that is on paper that defines how the governance system will work in that DAO.
Not just saying
it's not just saying if you have tokens you get a vote. What do you get a vote on? How much do you get to vote? How is the token? How is the weighting?
That's a good point, because it's kind of been a marketing thing.
Oh,
we have a governance token.
Is there going to be, you know, like a thing the way that, like, similar to what the United States has, where they have a filibuster sort of, and what's the number for the filibuster? And is there going to be things like that? You know what I mean? And if you look at that and you can see in a system, like a proper system where everybody gets a proper say, and the says are not weighted based on how much each person owns, because a single person can go, okay, I'm going to buy 10% and now I get to make all the decisions. You know what I mean? We want to prevent that. And so really quickly, I went back to a lot of the projects that I had looked at in the past that were touting, having DAOs, and they haven't made any progress on that. And that's a huge important thing that I realized is going to be a big conversation in the next 2 to 5 years.
I think so too.
It's one of the reasons why I think that crypto is not going to be where Web 2 is now until like 2030 or 2031, because I just don't think that we as people are going to be able to learn and adapt fast enough to figure out how to make that work.
See, it's interesting you say that. I have a bit of a different prediction. 2027.
Yeah.
I think by 2027, within the next 4 years, we are going to see, I don't know necessarily what the reform will be, but it'll be a completely new financial system by then. Now, where am I getting that number? Yes, I'm speculating. I can't predict the future. I'm not a psychic.
I'm also
But when I'm seeing, when you go back to the history of Bitcoin and technology in general, I used to have to study this in engineering. It's called telescoping. Telescoping is the exponential curve of the improvement of technology based on, they calculate it from all of humans' history.
Yeah,
right?
so I've thought about that a little bit myself too, and I just wonder if like humans as learning to use that technology can keep up with that curve, and if they can't, would the curve not be just a little bit slower as humans struggle to keep up?
We have AI now. So
there's that. That's true.
So, and that probably is debatably even more of an interesting technology than all of crypto, because the implications for AI are massively profound. But that will speed up the implementation and understanding and development of other technologies. So it's like pouring jet fuel on the fire. And anyways, when you talk about the telescoping thing, and we look about the progress of technology in the last 10 years, 20 years, it's continuing to speed up, irregardless of all these roadblocks and stuff that's running into with regulations and governments.
Right.
So I really don't think it's going to take very long. And we know the halving is coming up next year. And historically, it's like one of the few key points in crypto where people bet on it. People think it's a guarantee.
If you look at a graph and you look at when Bitcoin halves and then you look at this graph, you'll notice this like
massive
hilarious jump in the January to March of each year that there is a halving. Like it's like clockwork. The amount that it jumps and how exactly that goes back down and what goes on there will vary based on the real world events, but it is consistent.
So people are betting, and it is still a bet because there's factors you don't know, that is a guarantee coming up.
Yeah, I'm calling that a 51% bet. Absolutely.
Right? But people are saying, well, the bull run, we already have signs right now that it's starting. We're kind of in the beginning phases, and they're expecting a run kind of leading up to that halving. And I would agree with them. I see a lot of the signs. I mean, we were talking about this kind of off camera or a bit before, but the amount of people looking for Web3 employment kind of stabilized when the bear market first started.
Yeah, it shot up when we had that bull market, and then it just plateaued when we had the bear market. It didn't go down. People continued to be employed and to seek employment in Web3, even when the price of your Farmers World tokens went down to half a cent. You know what I mean?
Because so it goes to show people are interested in this industry. They know it's a potential for the future.
That's right.
And plus, if you look back long enough, like you look back at the internet bubble and the internet boom, it was really the people that invested in all the tech companies that are the billionaires today. And I mean, Amazon stock crashed like 90-something% at some points. Like those Facebook struggled. Like these tech companies had issues. So it was the same kind of FUD. Oh, everyone was wrong. We shouldn't have invested in these. It's just a fad. It should be illegal. We need to control it. Blah, 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 blah. Like the same narrative was playing out back
when
then.
Facebook first released to the public and was a thing, it was like a trendy new thing people were just doing because it was the cool thing to do, you know what I mean? Because everybody wanted to be it was like the
social butterfly.
Yeah, and so I remember having a lot of friends and my family members like kind of pressuring me like, hey, you should get Facebook, it's really cool, you could talk to all your friends. And I was like, I don't need that crap, it's never gonna take, you know what I mean, like it's not important, whatever. And I remember like this huge resistance in me, and the moment that I actually got, I was like, oh, all my friends are here and I can message them, this is nice, you know what I mean? And it just kind of, I was immediately transformed. I had no idea what I was talking about until I finally looked at the thing, and then I was immediately transformed. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I feel like there's going to be like there's already sort of, it's already sort of happening. Where when you see like Web3 games being sort of quietly integrated into Epic Games Launcher and other things like that, and new things that are like Epic Games Launcher that are popping up, that are touting their own games and Web2 games.
Just like games not needing you to set up a wallet, you just log in with your
Google, it will eventually get to a point
account
where people will not be able to tell if they're playing a Web3 game or not. They're just playing a game, and if it happens that it's Web3, great. And if
if they want to extract some money, that's when they got to go through the process.
Yeah.
But until that point, they don't have to. And we're already seeing a lot of games kind of doing that. Well, there's a lot more we can talk about, but I want to make sure we don't go over time here. So I hope everyone enjoyed this episode and our conversation. As you can tell, we're following the news because it impacts play to earn, and it's just really interesting to see what's going on in this
Oh
industry.
man, we could make an episode every single day with the way things are moving right now.
I
It's
feel like that
crazy.
too. So thanks so much for joining us. Of course, if you're not subscribed to the channel, be sure to and hit that bell notification so you can stay up to date with all the great play to earn content we have coming out on a consistent basis. And until next time, cheers.